In Israel's occupation of Palestine, its tactics have become increasingly aggressive over the decades. So too, its crackdown on media workers covering the conflict. The targeted killing of Al Jazeera journalist and Palestinian American Shireen Abu Akleh, the latest example. In May 2021, an Israeli air raid brought down a building in the Gaza Strip that housed local people and international media offices, including those of Al Jazeera. Press freedom advocates said it was an attempt to silence journalists. A month later, Israeli police destroyed Al Jazeera equipment and arrested Jerusalem correspondent Gevara Boudeli. Breaking her hand in the process. Witnesses said her press sign was clearly visible and the arrest was unprovoked. Abu Akleh was also in her press vest and helmet at the time of her death.
Time and time again, it has been shown that, Israeli forces kill Palestinians, including Palestinian journalists, without cause in the occupied territory. And it's extremely rare that Israeli soldiers, captains, or military officials are ever held accountable for their actions.
Israel often uses what it calls secret evidence to detain Palestinian journalists for months without due process and restrict their movements. Attacks by Israeli forces have also left dozens injured. A Palestinian Center for Human Rights report in 2020 found journalists face, quote, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment at the hands of Israeli forces. In the wake of Abu Akleh's death, Israel's army says it does not target journalists, and its foreign minister suggested conducting a joint investigation and autopsy. An offer Palestinian leaders refused. Israeli forces have directly targeted journalists with lethal force in the past. In 2008, Israeli soldiers killed Reuters cameraman Fadel Shana. He filmed the tank as it fired the shell that killed him. His final images captured on tape before his camera was destroyed. Shana, too, was wearing body armor marked press at the time of his death. Shireen Abu Akleh was killed covering an Israeli raid on Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The Qatar-based broadcaster said Al Jazeera producer Ali Al-Samoudi was also wounded. The latest casualties of Israeli attacks on journalists that seem to go on with impunity. Zain Basravi, Al Jazeera.
The executive director of the International Press Institute, Barbara Trionfi, says it's important to find out if Shireen Abu Akleh was targeted.
It has been a terrible news that we received this morning, and we are very, very saddened about the killing of Shireen. Unfortunately, it also comes at a time when we have seen an increase in the killings of journalists around the world, precisely this year, and where we have seen an increase in attacks against the press in the West Bank and Gaza. So against Palestinian journalists in particular. So this, we are, of course, as Al Jazeera, we are also following the news and pushing, we'll be putting out a statement very soon calling for an independent investigation into this case. It's very important to understand whether Shireen has been targeted. Unfortunately, the information we have received so far appears that it could have been the case, which obviously would be a very serious crime. However, the most important thing now is that there is an independent investigation into this case, and we know how hard it will be to get there. There is a principle which is core to journalism, is core to coverage of any conflict, any crisis, which is journalists cannot be targeted. That's a war crime. So that is a principle that we need to fight to defend. And we cannot compromise on this. So definitely, IPI will use all its reach and reach to international organizations and members to ensure that there is a clear investigation and understand who is behind this killing and whether it was a targeted killing. Unfortunately, it seems that there was no confrontation between Palestinian fighters and Israeli army at that moment in that spot. So it seems that a group of journalists has been targeted. However, as you know, the facts are still unfolding, so we need to understand what happened.